Hello, so I'm going to be going through some of the corrections made throughout my MWAs. So right here is the very first draft that I had, and then here I have the second one, and then here's the final draft. And just like my other two MWAs, I'll also have this video up. It'll probably be the first video that you'll see. So from the very first podcast that I did for this MWA, I needed to improve by adding a quotation. That was a big one that I had to do, so I had something a little bit better to go on. Another thing that I did was I tried to focus more on categories. So, as you'll see, I came up with in this second one, formal versus informal, and then I kind of went into different subcategories within that to show how there's like a ton of different categories for linguistic identity. So I tried to do that. I also tried to make it more cohesive. I think that was, one of the bigger problems throughout the recordings that I've done, like in my MWA 1 as well, was just trying to make everything flow and show like the connection between each example that I was making. So that was one of the corrections I made as well. I also added citations to this, which is important. So those were the main things I can remember between my first and second draft. And then my third draft, I actually wrote out a whole script for this one. And I pretty much, for the most part, followed it almost exactly. There are a few times when I kind of went a little bit off because there was something I wanted to mention that wasn't in my script. But that again, I mentioned that I did that with my MWA 1, and that really helped me out. And I think it just sounds a lot better when it's scripted because, I'm not saying a lot or pausing or stuttering or like taking back what I've said. So that was another big one. And honestly, I don't know why I didn't do that from the very start. It would have helped me out a lot and it would have kept me on track throughout all of my drafts. But again, like when I first did this, I basically came up with like an outline, a really rough outline of all the points I wanted to hit, and then I just kind of, hit each point within, the categories. So that was actually more difficult to film. And even though it takes a while to come up with the whole script, the filming part is way easier. So that was a big thing I did here too. I also tried to tie it back to the quote that, I mentioned in the first, or at the big beginning, I guess. I mentioned it in the beginning. So I tried to tie all of my examples back to that one. Again, I tried to be more, cohesive within each topic. I hope I did a better job with that. I feel like I did, but I'm not completely sure, I guess. Anyway, I also did a reflection. I guess I just completely overlooked that in my second draft, which was a huge mistake for my grade, but I did add a reflection where I talked about 3 of the outcomes and how I've been working towards those throughout all of the assignments we've done. So I did talk about that. That was another big thing that I added to this. And just like from my MWA 1, I noticed that I can be a little redundant and repetitive. So again, with this one, I tried to fix that as well because I think that it gets kind of boring when you have to keep listening to the same thing said in a million different ways. So I tried to change that. Again, the script really helped me with that. Writing out a script, because if you read it and write it, you'll be more aware of how redundant and repetitive you're being. So that was a big thing that helped. But even still, I had to keep, repeating the point to show how it kind of connected. So I tried to do that, but, phrase it differently so it, didn't sound so repetitive. But that was another thing I did. Again, writing a script was the most helpful for me. Like writing an exact detailed script and then adding my reflections as well. Again, I just totally looked over that. So that was another thing I added, and yeah, that was a pretty easy one. I didn't, do any slides because I was trying to make this more of a podcast, but I wanted the screen that people saw to be like the main point. So I made that, my definition of linguistic identity, and then had my citation at the end for the quote that I used. But yeah, those are all of the corrections that I made.